This is my banana test of the Dermapen M8S. So these are at the 1.0 setting at speeds 1, 3, and 5. Just pokes, kind of lighter at the top and harder, like more pressure toward the bottom. Some variation in how long I held the pen there. But bottom one doesn't look great, but overall these seem like fairly, that one not great either. They mostly look pretty good though. I think they look worse at 1.5. When I was doing the 1.5 pokes, it felt like the needles here were extending far enough out that when like the needles made contact before the pen, before the plastic did, supporting the needles. So it kind of felt like the needles would skid a bit, and I think you can see that before they kind of find their place, they skitter across the surface, which I don't think would feel great if it was your skin. Not a big difference in the speeds as far as I can tell, other than, I guess you get more punctures, so these look darker. Although I don't really know why more would matter if it's not moving around. So maybe that indicates there's like a little bit of moving around that happens. This is 0.5, sorry for going out of order. Nothing much to report here. I wish I could measure the depth of the punctures, because especially at 0.5, I think I was probably putting more pressure on most of these because it just wasn't even sure if the needle was clearing the plastic guard at that point. So here are the drag tests. I did these at 1.0 and 1.5 depth, and I was definitely alarmed by this at first, just because it's a much more visually dramatic result, but also this is way more distinct punctures compared to this. So I have a denser poke test. Actually, I'll do that. Let's look at that first. So this is the denser poke test. These are all at 1.0 depth, at 1, 3, and 5 speeds, and I kind of divided it. The top here is harder and longer, and at the bottom is less pressure and shorter duration. So there's still a pattern here, just because of the alignment of the needles in the tip, or in the cartridge, but I like the look of these fairly well. There's you don't see that skittering on entry. They look like pretty clean punctures. And these, they definitely are darker when you apply more pressure, but they look clean still. I don't really see the point. I'm not an expert, but I don't really see the point of the frequency being 5 times higher, if that's how it scales, or like, if the needles are going into your skin once, that seems like enough. So I kind of wish you could just tell it to like do 1 rapid fire poke and then stop, rather than, I'm assuming this is actually doing it like hundreds of times, even for like a short poke. But in any case, these are the drag tests. So getting really close with them, I think as a result of the motion, like you can see some of these, that skittering when I first put it down. Not many of these look like kind of that perfect puncture that I'm wanting. I think a lot more of them tend to have like a tail. These don't look as bad, I suppose. It's possible I could have, like, I don't think I fully had even distribution of my serum. I just used some squalane. But I think, especially, areas like this where the punctures are almost touching each other, to your skin, like, doesn't a series of very close together micro punctures, isn't that basically like a cut? And, you know, couldn't it have a higher chance of producing some sort of visible pattern or scarring? I don't know. Not a dermatologist, but I think for the dragging tests, I would think maybe the higher speed actually has a benefit, because there's less chance of like the motion happening while the needle is actually in the banana, and maybe you can see that here. I think I'd say the 5 punctures, besides that, you know, kind of rough landing, I think they look a little better than the 1 punctures in terms of their, like, you know, straight up and downness. I think that might have just been like not great lubrication. I'm not certain though. And then I did a circle test, you know, doing small circles at 2 different depths, at these various speeds, and it's really hard for me to see the individual punctures on these 1.0 depth tests. Like, even with the naked eye, it kind of just, like, all I can really see is this kind of, you know, bruising looking pattern, which maybe that's a good sign. I mean, I don't see punctures that I'm not happy with, like, dragged out. You know, I guess that's probably where I put the pen down. So maybe still some rough landing issues that you want to look out for. I feel like you can see the holes better at 1.5 for whatever reason. And, you know, the darkness is a little more visually alarming, but then again, that is maybe what we're going for. Sorry, I think I need to get this more stable. I don't like the look of this as much, just because, you know, to me this looks just like chewed up hamburger skin, which isn't what I want. And I think this was just a few seconds of circling, like maybe between 2 and 4 seconds. This is, you know, this looks better, but I just wish I could see a little better. I think I need to do another circle test to try to get just a little better visibility into the punctures, because maybe I didn't have enough pressure, or maybe this is just amazing, or maybe it's terrible. But that is all the tests from banana number 1. I don't know if there'll be a banana number 2 for you, but for what it's worth, here's this. And forgot to mention, this is with a 36 needle tip, which I'm not planning to use on my face. I think I'm gonna use the 18, I wanna say 16 or 18 for that, but I didn't want to waste those, and I feel like this is more or less applicable. I suppose maybe, you know, the drag tests or the circle tests with less needle density might look better, so maybe I'll test that. Okay, so I tried with a second banana, and I spread the serum with my finger beforehand to make sure there's no glide issues. So I did the tests here at 0.75, 1.0, and 1.5 at speeds 4 and 6, because I figured higher is probably better here. 0.75, looking pretty good, I gotta say. The difference in the density of the needles is pretty stark, actually. So this is the 16 or the 18 needle, much more spread out, so I think that helps with, you know, avoiding some of the chewed up look that we saw. But, you know, I don't know the ideal density for these holes. Maybe this is still more holes than is desirable, but they look pretty clean overall. At 1.0, I think the holes still look pretty good. Obviously, you get more darkening happening here, but I don't see a a lot of holes that I'm not happy with here. This was, I was doing basically like a quick 5 count as I did the circle, so kind of like 1, 1000, 2, 1000, 3, 1000, 4, 1005. Not, you know, the most standard, but standard-ish. Oh, sorry, the banana's slippery. 1.5. No. I think a rough landing here. Those holes don't look good, but I want to say like this is still a little less consistency, like maybe because of the depth, it's spending more time in the banana, or maybe it's not withdrawing as far, but it doesn't look terrible. I think I like the look of this the best, you know, probably the best balance of depth and cleanliness. So then we have line tests again. I just did a single pass from left to right. These are much harder to see because the density of the needles is so much lower. You know, some bigger holes when you first put the pen down. So maybe just put it down on a part of your face you don't like. But the rest of these holes look pretty good and pretty well separated, I think. At 1.0, again, I don't love that landing, but the individual holes are not bad. I don't know if I see a difference between 4 and 6, really. Are these closer together? I can't tell. What do I hear? Maybe a little closer together. On the bottom. And then at 1.5, we got the most darkening here. Some of these look a little bit misshapen and or, you know, actually like touching each other. Is there less of that at speed 6? Maybe. Like here, you can see the holes are very close together, but still separated. Whereas here, I feel like it's got a little draggy, perhaps. So maybe if you are gonna do lines, you do want to go for the maximum speed. But again, with these like 4 versus 6, I'm really hard pressed to see a big advantage there, and similarly here, if anything, I think these might look a little bit better at speed 4, but some of that could just be due to, like, you know, the relative angle that I was working on the banana. Yeah, I think this makes me feel a little better about the possibility of circling or drawing lines, and maybe the move is to see if any of the research actually tells you, you know, how many punctures per square centimeter would we like, and, you know, how can, like, also I'm curious what the trade-off is between, you know, with these, I think we are probably inserting the needle into the same hole fewer times compared to when we're doing those pokes, because we're constantly moving here. So what is the trade-off? Like, is there a downside to poking that same hole 100 times versus 6 times? I don't know, but this is probably the last banana before I just try it on my face. Anyway, hope this is helpful. Good luck to everyone. I do recommend practicing on a banana, especially like with these landings. I think some of those could be, you know, unpleasant mistakes to make on your own face. So I found this kind of like review from the Indian Dermatology. This description of microneedling from this review is using 16 micropunctures per square centimeter and then doing 15 passes, resulting in 250 holes per square centimeter. So maybe that's the ideal. This is if it's kind of the standard like technique they've been studying. So, I mean, 250 per square centimeter is quite dense. So that's probably more like what we're seeing with the circling versus the overlapping pokes. But of course, you could always just do more overlapping pokes. But if that's the goal and the circling works fairly well, which it seems like it does, then maybe circling is the way to go and saves you from the risk of repeated rough landing, wounds. Okay, for the final test, I did pokes using the 18 needle pen with, I ballpark, I did about 45 pokes, and I figured this was about 3 square centimeters, which I think would kind of line up with the math from the paper to kind of aim at 250 punctures per square centimeter. I might have really fucked that math up, but I think what I'm seeing is that these are kind of less well distributed when doing pokes than when circling, which makes sense because, I'm only placing it down a limited number of times versus continuously moving it. It isn't horrible. I think there might be more places here where you wind up with punctures right next to one another, which, basically just creates a larger wound. And I think especially at 1.5, the poking gets a little more tenuous due to the impact and the fact that needles are sort of the first thing making contact, or that's how it feels. So I'm kind of leaning toward trying the circling, since the distribution of these pokes is more uniform and you can control the density by varying the duration. So if this was about 2 or 3 seconds, you could just, try to have it be about 1 second per circle covered area, and you'd get a resulting decrease in the density. Because, this looks like it could be more than 250, but obviously I can't count. But yeah, so here's this. Is this your goal, or is this your goal? Or is, well, this certainly isn't your goal. I guess you would do a star pattern or a grid or something. But I think I will probably try this first and see how that goes. Maybe work my way up to here. Still not as sure. 1.5 seems a little aggressive. But I think that's going to be the video. Thanks for watching. Hope this is helpful.